You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hard.
Hi guys, it's Tanya.
Hi, it's Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
So today we have a fun one, an interesting one. I guess that depends on how you define fun, but we thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about and kind of what your feelings are, what we think, what kind of brings about different maybe attraction to cults. So we thought, let's talk about the different elements of cults, of things that we see from the outside, the things that people may see from the inside, and all of those different details. So today we thought we'd start out with just discussing what particular maybe cults or, different documentaries. Now it's kind of big for us to be able to watch on Netflix, Amazon Prime, things like that, documentaries, and be able to know about these different cults. And it's also just kind of popular in everyday life,
Right.
news, things like that. But is there any one in particular or any kind of aspects of a cult that will draw you towards, like, say, watching a documentary about cults or things that really kind of interest you in that regard?
Yeah, I guess when I first think of cults or anything like that, I feel like I was always exposed, not because I was in a cult, but I feel like I was always exposed to cults because my mom was very much, I guess because the whole Charles Manson thing started, was in the 60s and stuff. My mom was very fascinated with Charles Manson. And so whenever it would come up, however many years it would be when he would be open for parole, we would all watch it as a family. And of course, he'd always be denied. He'd always be denied parole. I can't remember if it was every 4 or 6 years, but it felt like it was often that we were watching his ridiculousness displayed on TV. Because back then there wasn't, the internet. You had 3 or 4 channels that you could watch it on, and it was very exciting. So that was my first exposure to cults. And I remember being very fascinated with how would anyone follow him? He just seems so gross and, just everything you hear about him. And then of course you hear about well, why would everyone drink all that Kool-Aid and why would do that? So I just was I think most cults I've been very interested in because I just never understood why people would be drawn to it. But then also I understood why they would be drawn to it because some of them it's like, oh, that does seem kind of safe and nice and you all like the same thing or you like to wear white robes or you like to, there's a lot of things, a lot of commonality. So I do feel like there has been a lot throughout my life that I've been like, okay, I'm very fascinated with it. Some of them I've been just like, whoa, this is really weird or scary. But a lot I have been really interested in. And I notice whenever there's a documentary on Netflix or HBO or wherever you see it, I tend to try to watch them just because I find it, as a therapist, I find it so interesting. But also as somebody as a human, I've always been very interested in cults and the idea of them and how people join them and how the cult leader always, I'm just generalizing, but they always seem to be really gross and just
I wasn't expecting you to say that, but that's a good way to say it.
Because I was going to say a gross guy, but there's gross women too. But they're always just ugh. Why would you follow this person? They just are either greasy or gross or out of shape. They're just not they're not supermodels. They're not either way. It's not someone you're wow, this person's so charismatic and handsome or beautiful. It's just really strange.
Yeah, no, for real. It is definitely it's that strange dichotomy of what's the pull when all I'm seeing visually, at least from someone who's not, in that line of magnetism towards it, what's the pull towards this greasy, I don't know, possibly, drugged up person who's spewing all this crap, what I think that is what makes it fascinating is from the outside, it looks so obvious, like, this is just ridiculous. But there are such strong factors outside of that that do attract people that overcome that visual of the
Right.
grossness, so it must be pretty strong. That's a
Yeah.
good point, though, because I think that's why we find it so fascinating is how could someone overcome that, maybe visual, or kind of maybe just the display of what this seems like. Maybe they're seeking other things. And I absolutely I'm with you on the, kind of being interested in it as just as a person and as a therapist, that it's kind of like the human condition. What do our brains tap into? What are we attracted to? And I mean, I think we do that all day with people, right?
Right.
Okay, what's their motivation? What's this core thought, core feeling? And cults taps into all of those themes, of what we're drawn to, what, maybe would look very strange taken out of this context, but in the context of this person's world, they find that very appealing.
Yeah.
The point where they'll give up their whole life, their life
Mhm.
savings, who they are, their family, their identity to go be a part of this group.
Yeah.
I'm not really quite sure what it is, but I think I've boiled it down to when I'm interested in something, like one of the documentaries, the thing that really sticks out to me is if there is a very oddly charismatic kind of character of a leader and they're just going to be absurd in some way. And it's kind of it's a little bit of like, okay, how far are they going to push the boundaries in that? And
Yeah.
I kind of watch for that like popcorn moment, of like what's going on. That's kind of
Yeah.
fascinating, on like a low level of human kind of
Yeah.
attraction to that.
Like
That's what
how
attracts
much are
me.
they going to ask of their members or their followers?
Yeah.
And because once it also seems like you see the shift too, especially in the documentaries, where maybe they just had like a couple people or they had an idea, but then something shifts in the cult leaders thinking when they're like, oh, I can get more, I can do more if I do it this way, or I can get a
Yeah.
different
Get a taste of power.
response. Yeah, it's very, and then you wonder, were they always like this, or did something shift in them too that made them want to, or sometimes was it an accident that they became a cult leader? Or was this always their plan?
Yeah, it's funny to trace that back and to kind of look at, in some of the examples, which, I think are kind of common out there. There's often some form of awakening or understanding of, this is kind of the way, because a lot of people who join maybe feel a little lost, feel like they need some guidance, and they've maybe gone to other common areas of, like maybe school or job or, family, and they haven't been able to receive guidance from those kind of societally accepted, areas of guidance. So they're looking for these little pockets of, people who are, maybe caught on to some form of enlightenment that they feel like they need in their life. So I think that, people tend to have that in common, join cults, and they may be at a particular time where not only are they lost, but they're kind of maybe vulnerable, maybe a little broken. And there's areas to fill that space. And here are these, either charismatic people or a person who's promising that and who's saying, all I want in return is for you to just be you. And in the grand scheme of things in society, there's not really any space, that says, hey, I accept you for just you. Right. Like a lot of times it's at work, it's what you give as a worker. In your family, it's your role as, a family member, whatever that may be.
Right.
As a friend, it's what you can offer as a friend. But this just seems so appealing and outside maybe the bounds of society as to what, can be offered. And I think for people that maybe have not gotten great feedback in those other areas, or maybe they don't have that available, they feel like, okay, it has not been enough, but here it could be enough in this particular cult or whatever, ideas. Yeah.
And then it is interesting too, because then it's like people who may have never, you said like, never felt like, they show up or they're the most important thing too. So maybe that's what they're hearing when I'm just thinking old school, like they just get a brochure like, hey, join this cult. Like, so when they're reading up on it or they get, I don't even know how, like, somebody's like, hey, you know what? You look lonely or you look like you would need 70 friends.
Yeah.
s-
Or like you
like
could use
how do
some love.
yeah. Like, I wonder how, like, that's also like the marketing. Like, how do you know where to, is it college campuses? Is it, outside of, like a bar where people are going there at, 10 a.m.? Like, where do you find people?
Well, I
Like
think
it
that's
just,
part of the strategy, right? Is like kind of, where would we find people who are looking for this? We have this to offer.
yeah.
If it's someone who maybe needs a family, yeah, you might go towards, I don't know, homeless shelters or, yeah, maybe, areas, places like, college campuses and maybe look for that person that, or those people that are staying over break, right?
Hmm.
That are, oh, they don't have anywhere to go or they don't have
Yeah.
family
Oh,
here.
yeah. Yep.
So it's kind of very psychologically preemptively manipulative in that
Yeah.
way, right? To kind of fit that need. But yeah, I think that's kind of part of it is, like some other kind of well-known cult slash maybe religions or whatever it is that they're labeled as, which shall
Sounds
not be
like.
named.
No, just kidding.
You know what we're talking about. They would recruit people. That was like one of the jobs in this particular, organization where they would send people out to like recruit and they would say, okay, if, are to think about in terms of where we would get like the perfect candidate, where would you go? You would probably go outside of here,
Mhm.
outside of this place. Or sometimes it just may be walking up and down and just kind of, kind of trolling to kind of just see like who's gonna pay attention to some of these keywords like connection or
Right.
you know good energy or acceptance or those, what do you call those, like those words, the
Yeah,
kind of
it sounds very salesy,
buzzwords.
subliminal. Yeah, just something.
Yeah, like there's kind of words that people pick up on, and it's the same in social media for marketing. If you start talking about, I don't know, something that some amazing cleaner or whatever that you need.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm thinking of that, but you'll start to get ads pop up,
Oh,
from
yeah.
that because you said the word cleaner or, like I need to be able to do this and I'm right near my phone. So I'm sure it's going to be
Yeah,
loaded
all of a
with
sudden you're
ads for
gonna have
that.
like all the cleaners. Like, oh wait, here's all the Clorox.
Right.
Some,
And it's, yeah, that's their kind of like they pick up on the
yeah.
algorithm, but they're like, okay, what would want someone who want to attract someone who would want to belong, who would
Mm-hmm.
need like a connection, who
Yeah.
would promote loyalty, who
Yeah.
would continue to work for this.
Well, in this day and age too, since we are, they're not handing out paper brochures, they are probably a little more savvy of joining different groups online and trying to see, like maybe they're joining groups where people are lonely or looking for friends or, who knows what it might look like, or create Facebook groups. So people would want to, or different types of groups. So people might want to join, and then there could be recruitment that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure it's kind of, some people aren't even aware that there's, I'm not trying to, be scary here, but there's, groups that might be, it might look just kind of like a regular, oh, I'm just here to like meet people, but then, maybe it starts to shift into something else once you're kind of into knowing people and connecting with them.
Right.
And, that's a piece that I think is kind of fascinating is that it's not necessarily people who are gullible and open or maybe not too bright that join cults. It certainly can be people that are maybe kind of missing something, maybe aren't aware they're missing something and they're being drawn in for those particular reasons. Because in past history, we see cults like even with Charles Manson, a lot of his, some of his followers were, from very, middle class or upper middle class families who seemingly had not too many issues. And he didn't, what's fascinating to me is he didn't do any of the killing and he
Right.
still got, more time than most, because they saw how influential he was in being kind of a, leader towards these people. And I think, some of these people maybe were missing something where they felt like they weren't a part of something important
Mhm.
or they weren't a part of a movement.
Yeah.
Back in that era, it was like about, kind of, being, are you going to stand up for, this because you really believe in this? Are you for the government? Are you for like free, being free, kind of like the hippie
Mhm.
movement kind of thing, and, that was kind of pitted against one another. So there could have been that in the air
Yeah.
that people were feeling like, I need to rebel
Yeah.
against my conservative family
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Or
Um,
if you're just, or if he, if he found people in college campuses, they might not be in neither. They might just be studying and then realize like, oh wait, am I missing this big piece of something. I didn't know I was missing it until he approached me or until I saw him sitting on the quad or wherever, whatever they did.
Yeah. It starts talking all philosophy with his guitar or whatever, I don't know. I just picture Charles Manson doing that. But
Greasy hair.
yes. Just singing, come be witchy with me. That was something he liked to say. Go do something witchy like a woman. The way, oh my gosh. I've seen old interviews with him and he is
creepy.
Just, yeah. And then, of course, there's other conspiracies about him, government conspiracies about, with MK Ultra.
Yes, I've heard about that. Like that he was actually maybe normal before he was dosed with a lot of LSD, but who knows?
I don't know that he was ever normal. I don't want to go that far, but maybe he wasn't as Charles Manson-y as he is,
Yeah, who knows? I mean, yeah.
But
there's never been anyone to vouch for that, to say, oh, yeah, he was like a great son,
That's true. That's true. So maybe I don't know. Yeah. Because, who knows? But there's a lot of different things that happened.
But there are different reasons why people join cults too. And like, it's always, and another thing that I was thinking of that really fascinates me too, is how a lot of people on certain ones will not only stop talking to their family and everything, but they'll just uproot and move to wherever it's located.
That's true. Yeah. Like they'll give up everything. And, and in that regard, I think you think, okay, an 18 to 20-year-old, maybe they don't have that much to give up and they're kind of looking for something.
Right.
But there's been people that, I mean, we've seen in some, documentaries that they had children, they had families, and, maybe they either brought the kids with them or maybe they left them behind, and so it's a really powerful message of, we're going to be able to fulfill this that you feel is missing, or maybe that, like you said, they didn't even realize was missing until then. And it's such a deeply felt connection and a point of, I need to get this I need to see this through and see what this is about and get this fulfilled, even over maybe my own family in the course of my, taking care of children or, my possessions or my family connections, whatever it may be. I may leave that all behind because this feels so important. And I kind of wonder if there was any, because sometimes there can be a fine line, I think, between what somebody considers is a cult, in quotation marks, right, versus a group of people who maybe they all live together. Maybe it's, maybe perceived as a cult because there may be kind of common values that people all live by. They all decide to live in a group and there's this group dynamic that's maybe a little bit outside of the rules of society. And sometimes I think that can be, and I am not saying at all in like the case of Charles Manson or, other things like this, other kind of well-known cults like the Hale-Bopp comic cult or whatever, that those were healthy cults by any means. But I do think maybe sometimes some people can find some solace in that, find some safety, find some connection where it's not harmful. I mean, possibly, maybe we just don't hear about it too much.
Well, there used to be a lot of talk about it, again, going back to the 60s or 70s or whatever, like the communes, where that used to actually be, all right, these people are a little different. They're all living on land that they bought together or whatever, but they're living, and people are like, okay, this is just what they choose. But it wasn't considered a cult. It was just a group of people all living together. But now I think because we are as a society probably more educated on what defines a cult. It's like, one person where everyone listens to and may not have their best interest, might have their interest in most, more so than anything else. And maybe the people are being harmed, maybe financially, maybe other ways. But yeah, I don't think there is a lot wrong if a group of people choose to live together, if they choose as a group. If one person isn't telling them, hey, let's move to Montana or something, and just live off the land because this is what I say is best, and they have no desire to be there, then that's a little different than if it's just a group of friends or a group of people who are like-minded who want to do this.
Yeah. And it becomes tricky because then there's kind of some, possibly there's some brainwashing involved where some people may say, oh no, I do want to do this, but it may be leading some members of the group or maybe all members of the group towards something that's not healthy for them or something that they didn't really sign up for in the beginning. And maybe it's kind of just getting out of control, or maybe they actually become an active part of the recruiting. And they're like, oh, hey, this is something that I believe in so much. And then they're in kind of deep, and then they're also recruiting other people, and sometimes it can just be a group of people with a shared vision. Maybe they just want to live off the land. They don't really want too much involved with, the outside of society, or maybe something they perceive as toxic, or a lot of things they perceive as not healthy, whatever it is. And everybody's just kind of, doing their own thing, and they can function and do well. Again, I don't think we hear too much about that. So I don't know if those actually exist. I'm sure there probably are some, groups that they would just probably say, hey, we're just kind of groups, that we have like a shared goal. There's plenty of things like that out there. I think the fine line becomes when it's not healthy for, everyone, and maybe things are kind of out of control, or one person has all the control. I think there can be a lot of different factors of where it becomes a cult. Right.
Yeah. And they're forcing them not to have communication with their family. It's different than if you choose to step away from your family, in sound mind. But if you're being forced to stop communication, or you're not allowed to have access to your own money, or even you can't even go grocery shopping on your own. It all has to be, all right, well, this is what we're eating. This is what we're doing. It's, that's a little different than, oh yeah, we're all choosing to do this. This is just because this is for the betterment of us.
Yeah, like they're all aware of the consequences, because I think there can definitely be a point where it's unhealthy, but everybody is quote unquote choosing this, right? They want to live by this, but they're not aware of all the consequences, or like how far removed they've kind of come from that. So they may say, oh no, I chose to cut off my family. Like there was that Hale-Bopp, the cult that was like, they thought the Hale-Bopp when it returned or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I remember like that was that the one with the guy with the bull haircut?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they kind of all like, maybe sought to be androgynous. They thought when the next Hale-Bopp came, they would be kind of taken away, and things didn't work out as planned. And then they all literally, I think, drank Kool-Aid with like,
because it was originally like a co-host cult thing, because it was like, and then the one cult, well, because like it was a male, because usually it's just like one cult, and then like, so it's like, all right, we're both cult leaders. I mean, I don't know how you just what you could. So it's co-cult. But she ended up dying. Like the second one ended up dying of cancer. And then that's when I think the Hale-Bopp, I can't remember the name of that cult, but that's when they he kind of started going a dark turn. It started not to be so love and everything, and started to really, okay, well, then suicide and, being talked about. And it just really got dark, and it seemed like he was very unwell. But
they upended their whole belief system. And so the male had to take over and kind of say, oh, well, you know what? This is the way we actually get there, kind of thing, by suicide. And then they all committed suicide. So I don't know that there's really any force involved, in terms of like anybody's like holding a gun to your head, or I don't know, maybe there are some, where it's like you have to kind of, abide by this, or it's life threatening. I think it's more of like a psychological kind of turning, right? Like kind of a slow cooker in that, like you're kind of sitting in these ideas and you're kind of marinating in them, and day after day, and they kind of, start to make sense. And it's kind of what you've been looking for. But then ultimately it's maybe for someone else's benefit, or, for a benefit that this person didn't initially sign up for.
Yeah, because with that one, there were people who left after that, after they realized, oh, wait a minute, we're all not going to be taken by the alien ship or whatever. When they realized that was not true, a couple of people left, and then because they realized that it was starting to turn a little dark.
Yeah, and there were people that were able to be interviewed in the documentary I saw, and it really was like we really had strong belief in the woman, and but then when she died and things didn't work out as planned, it was just like a wake up call. And it just kind of was like, oh wait, maybe this is not what I thought it was. And some people may look at that and think that's completely silly and they would never fall for that. But it can be when you are, I think, searching for something, just kind of I think the psychology behind this and, looking at the mental health aspect. I think when you're really searching for something, you're really desperate for something that you perceive as not available in other areas of society. You think you have to almost go out and discover it and
Right.
find that, and that other people do know it, but they maybe either are trying to kind of hide this big truth or this awareness, or, it's something that you kind of yourself are a person who is maybe more enlightened towards figuring that out, because
Right.
you've kind of felt this pull, this draw towards it. And so it really kind of fulfills a need in that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that can be a strong force especially if you're at particular points where you're, really kind of have spaces that need to be filled, which as humans, we have a lot of those
Yeah.
developmentally.
While you're saying that, I was just thinking, how many times I know I have gone so into work or into something because the rest of my life was lacking. So I've had jobs where my whole life was centered around my job and it was my identity, and I didn't have hobbies or I didn't really have any other interests. It was just my job. And I'm not saying it was a cult, but it felt very, I felt like I lost myself in some jobs. And so I can understand how that can happen if you're so lost, or or you find something you believe in or you feel like you believe in it, and how it can be really possible to just want to continue believing it or find happiness or just feel like you're finding yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good example that I think most people can relate to, right? Some people can get lost in different areas of their life. And a lot of times as adults, it can be work, right?
Hmm.
Or because that's something we need to survive. And then we really want to get good at it. We really want to, make money. And then it might just become your identity. And that's a similar process to, it could be a similar process, I guess, to, if somebody is really kind of searching to make meaning, to make something the core of themselves that they feel is not understood or that needs to be expressed in them, something that they've always maybe felt was missing, or maybe they're just realizing. If somebody is promising that and then saying, and we accept you, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to prove anything, it's such an area outside of society that we don't really have a lot of spaces for. And so I could see it being very attractive, to people that need to connect with that
Yeah.
need to feel that. And we have like everyday things that are kind of similar processes, but they're not cults, right? They're
Right.
not like, harmful. Like, we were talking about, there's things that you can get really absorbed in that all have the same shared vision, same, ways of living, with like, activities, groups, sports clubs, things like that we might get really into. But a big difference there is that, there is that kind of outlining of, okay, everybody's going into this. This is for something that you want to do. And that the rules are kind of outlined there, right?
Right.
You're not going into it and then realizing, oh, I got to, give up my money and, kind of shift my identity and I don't know, shape my head. Although I don't know, some people might do that for
Yeah.
like a super fan or something like that, but that's their choice, if they
Yeah.
want to do that. And again, it kind of comes down to that thing of, what is choice once you are kind of under that influence, because you may think, oh, I chose to do this because I really want to please this person. I want to be a part of this group. But outside of that context, would you
Yeah.
have chosen that? And like, what's the reasoning? It's very philosophical, I think.
Yeah. Or did you choose it because all of a sudden you're feeling all this love and attention from other beings that you haven't felt from anyone in your past, let it be your job, your family, other friendships, or you felt like it was something that you're lacking or something you never even had until all of a sudden you're receiving it from all these people and it feels great. It probably feels awesome. And by time
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm in this." You probably don't even realize you're in it, but your family does, or other people who once knew you do.
Yeah. It's funny. When you were saying that, I was thinking of almost kind of like an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
It can almost be a similar kind of vetting process, of, kind of not really, being love bombed and kind of being like, oh, they're so great. But then slowly you're kind of taken away from your family. And
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely parallels there,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, like, and it's interesting too that you said like the abusive relationship, because a lot of times people are like, well, how, like it is almost like, I don't want to say like all the abusers seek someone out, but it does seem like they find a certain or look for a certain type of person to be able to manipulate. It's unfortunate, but there are people who are very manipulative when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because if you're securely attached, if you're, have a healthy attachment to like family, to, people that you care about, a community, you're probably going to receive feedback enough and see people that you really connect with, that you care with. If somebody is approaching you saying, hey, this, like I can give you this or I can give you that, you're more likely to be like, see that awareness or that understanding through other people that are in your lives that you trust, that
Right.
you're like, oh wait, that actually might not be good for me. And I mean, somebody could still override that and be like, oh wait, well maybe I'm just kind of, I need to get away from this, town, or I'm feeling like I maybe kind of need something really different, or I'm missing
Hmm.
kind of this spiritual connection kind of thing. You could still definitely, have a secure attachment and be kind of pulled away. I think it's probably more likely if you don't have those secure connections, that it would be maybe an easier draw,
Right.
and in terms of like their efforts, that would be kind of people who they would target, are people that are not securely attached in relationships and communities.
Hmm.
But I definitely think they would be kind of more
Hmm.
outliers, in that.
Yeah. I was also thinking while you're talking about that, it reminded me of like a certain type too that might be looking. So, like we've talked about how the cults or other stuff might be looking for the people, but sometimes people are also seeking and,
Mm,
like, oh, well, let me try this. Oh, no, let me try this. Let me try that. Because they're always trying to figure out again, who are they? What makes them happy? What makes them feel whole? Because it is something lacking, but they're constantly seeking it too.
yeah.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because with so much, especially with the range of connections, quote unquote, and information that we can get on, social media, on the internet in general, can reach a lot of people who, say, if you just Google in the word, I don't know, connection, right? Like, you say you're feeling kind of like I'm not connecting with anyone. If,
Yeah.
a group has that type of buzzword out there, they may have literature out there to kind of attract you to a particular group. And there's also another thing, is this group may not have started out as, I mean, their intentions may be really to connect people, right? And it's just, maybe it might evolve into kind of a more unhealthy,
Hmm.
kind of group
Yeah.
think, and whatever the mission kind of slowly
Hmm.
becomes. Like, we were talking about this other, I guess I would say cults, or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever they're termed as, that we saw a documentary on Netflix, and how these people were attracted to, a belief in belonging and feeling like this one person, Mother God was her
Yeah.
title, how she kind of felt for humanity. She was kind of like a Jesus like figure, kind of like a, kind of felt all the ails of humanity. And how I think people were probably initially, they were kind of lost. They wanted to feel something authentic, something
Hmm.
connected, but how it turned out was really not that. And so how it kind of evolved, and then the actual belief system, or I don't know, they were a little chaotic and
Yeah.
disorganized.
It was hard to try to, and it seemed like she was a seeker too. Like she was always trying to figure out,
Mm,
like, who am I? What do I need? What's missing in my life? And then she found people that she appointed Father God because they would fulfill her needs. Like, it probably was a little selfish at first, but then her ego started to build and other things started to happen. And she realized, like, oh, wait, it could be more than just me and you. It could be, we can make this bigger. And maybe finances or people or the power started to really make it into a cult or whatever it is, or if it was a movement or a religion. I mean, I couldn't really tell if it was a religion. It was so, like you said, so skewed. It was so weird. It was like all over the place, a lot of drugs.
I think, Aaron, you said that really nicely, is that these people, I think, they really may have this purpose, this mission, which is very well meaning. the people themselves that started, it could be, sometimes it's not, right? But it could be. And I think they may really feel something authentic. They may attract people who really want that. And it may be that is okay, that's really good. And the point, I think, where there is concern is when that gets out of control. Maybe there's like addictions, like there was alcohol and, like you said, drug addictions in there. There was, there was some eating disorders. There was, you know, a lot of things that were not being noticed. Instead, they were being enabled in the name of this person being, the carrier of all of humanity's emotions and feelings and in Mother God.
Yeah.
And so it really, and I, when I was watching that, I really could see some of the followers. I don't know if they still are an organization or whatever they are, that they really truly believed in what Mother God, like they really wanted to believe in that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, they believed so much that they did not even see how sick she was.
Yeah, they were placing the spiritual plane above the physical plane and saying like, well, she's just ascending to her higher state and she knows best, when really she was spiraling out of control and battling with a lot of things.
And everybody, that's a thing too with like group think and stuff like that. Nobody was saying like, hey, let's get her to the hospital. Let's stop this and let's just put this on pause. We can still love her and everything, but maybe we need to just call time out for a second and just get her help.
Yeah, because there were periods when, especially after the last Father God or whatever came in, at least this is what it showed in the documentary. I mean, that she was losing weight and he had to carry her, I think, at one point because
her feet weren't working anymore. Like it was just because she had like liver issues and then she was drinking some colloquial silver. I can't remember what it's called.
Colloidal silver.
Something like that. And it was just like very, like you could see her body was shutting down. It was just very like your feet don't get so swollen that you can't even see your toes anymore. And like it was just very,
and it was
awful.
It was, and it was, you pointed out, and I don't think I realized this, but she was turning like silver and because you're not supposed to ingest that much, if even at all, really.
Yeah, blue or silver or something. Yeah, it's just very.
Yeah. And I think they kind of saw that as like, oh, this is proof that Mother God is like the earth or, kind of that type of thing. Maybe they saw it as like a spiritual thing, but really there's, I guess maybe from our side of the non-cult pond, like we were like, hey, like that's kind of, she was poisoning.
Yeah, your friend's getting poisoned. Why don't you help her? But they can't see it because if anyone questioned it, someone else would say, oh no, this is the way. It's just very concerning sometimes, like stuff like that. It's just like, you almost want to be like, where is somebody to help? But they're not there because they don't see it.
Yeah. And I think in that regard, I think people are willing to almost push the boundaries of this is like a spiritual kind of awakening. Like she is embracing all the ails of humanity. And I think they really just kind of went over the edge with that, right? Because I think they were so drawn to that and they really started to trust in her word. And so even to the point where she's turning a different color and ingesting poisons, that they would see it as just a spiritual awakening. And there was a lot of drugs involved with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't do drugs, kids. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that can, I understand that people may want that for like spiritual kind of stuff, but you also have to realize that it can go too far. And that definitely went way too far. But, I think that it's such a good example of, I think I think there really was a genuine need for people to understand themselves and to have something bigger to believe in that. And some would say that, I'm trying to be careful here, but that, that is also how you would describe if you're looking for a religion, right? And so there's a lot of philosophical gray area, kind of things that we could get into. I think we're just kind of putting it out there just because we're interested in the psychological.
And we don't want to offend everybody, but it is a lot of the tenets of cults, if you look at it, could be seen in other things.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I always try to think of a hypothetical if I've ever had a client come to me and what would I be concerned about? And the answer is simple yet not so simple. It's kind of if something is not healthy for that person, if it's not working for that person and you're maybe you're sensing that, maybe you know that directly from what they're saying, or, maybe it's a matter of, of course, if it's someone who's a vulnerable population, like minors or something like that, you just have to report that, but
Right.
if you feel like they're in danger in some way, if they're being abused, like financially abused, or, if there's like, they're around, a lot of alcohol abuse or drug abuse, things like that, unsafe environments, quote unquote, that not quote unquote, I don't know why I said that, but
Yeah.
unsafe
Unsafe
environments.
environments.
Yeah.
Straight
up.
No,
Yeah.
no
No
quotes.
quote unquote.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that, but yeah, things like that you'd have to report. But for adults, it's kind of like you think, okay, they should be able to know what's safe. But that's the tricky thing about cults, is that it's kind of suspended in this degree. So it would be a lot of, checking that out and, investigating.
Well, and it's also interesting too, because if they did the investigations, probably a lot of times the websites are what lead them in and make it sound even more appealing.
Right.
Or, whatever information they're getting. So if they're like, I'm going to check this, I'm going to fact check this, all the facts you're getting are from that source. So it probably sounds awesome. Right, so it's really, and it's hard too, because if you're in it, or if you're seeking or whatever it is, you're not going to listen to those closest to you if they don't really want to listen to or be part of that new great thing that you just found.
Yeah. And I also would wonder if they at that point would even reach out for therapy. That's probably why I have not.
Yeah. I've
had
never
many of those.
I have never, I've had never had that, but I've had like, different, of course, different people really leaving different religion stuff, and just we talk about that, but that's, not a cult, but I have always been very fascinated. And I know there are certain therapists, that's all they work with, or they work with a lot of people who have left cults and stuff. I learned that just from watching the different documentaries, that there's different people, that's their specialty too, which is probably very interesting and also very draining as a therapist.
I would think so. Yeah, because you really have to build that person up. They have to find a support system, because their support system may have been that, that cult. And they also have to find their identity after the fact. And it's a lot of work for the person and for the therapist. Yeah. Like helping them along. It's a lot. So it can be really tough, but certainly I think they would probably be, people leaving a cult would be more inclined to seek out therapy as opposed to.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And,
probably not while they're currently in it. It'd probably be very difficult.
Yeah. Unless they wouldn't see anything as wrong.
Unless it's therapy from the place, like the place that we were thinking about earlier, that will not be named, that might have.
That's not real therapy. So.
Yeah, but they might offer some sort of therapy there, but.
They term it therapy, but it's not. It's like their own brand of what I perceive as somewhat.
It's not very healthy to have somebody talk about all the worst things in an untherapeutic environment.
Yeah, especially if you don't know, or if you're using that as in the future for blackmail. That is not.
Helpful, not good. Not what a therapist would do.
Exactly. Yeah. We're here to help, and if you're not being helped, then you're not with the right therapist. Or if you feel like, that's not really the case, then maybe, switch over. But that's a whole different topic.
Yes.
So I think this was a good discussion. I think there are so many different pieces that we talked about. We could go on for hours about this, really.
Yeah. And I do want to say one thing. I was just thinking, because I was thinking how I started off about Charles Manson. But like when you think and picture Charles Manson, like he just looked really deranged and looked like a person. You're like, oh my gosh, that's a cult leader. That's
the face of a cult.
That's a cult leader. So when you see that, but it looks different. Not every possible cult or anything like that it's not all going to look like Charles Manson, thankfully.
Right.
But it also, so it could just look like, like normal people. You're in the, like you go to, that you see at lunch, or you do different that, that just normal people that are out in society that aren't living in the woods.
Exactly. And that's kind of I think maybe the part, in terms of people that people that you can talk to online, things like that, you may not know these different things. It can get very blurred in terms of what is a cult, or what is something that's not healthy for you that you're being pulled into a group. And it's true. I think when we immediately think of a cult, I think, Charles Manson, that type of character. But that's because those are the ones that we know that we can define and say, oh, look, that is a cult. That was unhealthy. But there's a lot of little spaces in between where there may be some damage being done. Maybe we just haven't really heard about it. And it could be, down the street or something, something happening in your neighborhood or, things that you maybe find out about years later.
Yeah.
But
Don't bang down the door of every house that has more than 3 cars at it, because it could just be people visiting. We're not telling you to like stop all the colds, but
it's just to say that it could really,
I'm just
it
kidding.
looks different, I think, outside of
it does.
what we picture as like cults, and I think a lot of people are aware of that, but I don't know that people are like to the degree, like it can be so insidious and really, get to at a very...
I mean, like even different documentaries I've watched recently that were just put out this year or last year, a lot of them look like very normal people, and and I think that's, not very normal.
Some of them, I was kind of making a face.
Some of them do. I guess it's subjective, but it's for other people. I mean, they look more normal.
Yeah. And there's just so many subtleties involved in that. And again, we could really go on and on for hours, but we probably should wrap it up around this point.
Yeah, because this is when Tanya and I start going into we start going
conspiracy theories and down rabbit holes and aliens. That's fine, but we can save that another time. But let us know if you like this, if you want us to deep dive a little bit more. We hope you enjoyed this discussion about the topic, and let us know. Leave us a comment about your experiences or anybody else that you've heard of, or just what you think about this in general.
Yeah, that would be great. And and if you have other ideas we always ask like future episodes or anything, or if you want us to go a little deeper, but not too deep in this,
For sure. Yeah, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wicked Psychotherapists, and on Facebook we are the Wicked Psychotherapists. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us.
Share with your friends. Yeah.
Review really helps us out. Share anybody and everybody. But so let's close out there.
Okay.
And don't forget, stay wicked
and keep your mind well.
Yes, indeed. For sure. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.